This video is kindly sponsored by pcbway. Thank you, pcbway. In today's episode, we are going to take a look at this little board here, which is the SIDKickPico. In my opinion, one of the coolest devices you can get for your C64. And the best thing is, it is really cheap. pcbway was kind enough to sponsor this video and prepare these PCBs. And so, yeah, thank you, pcbway. I will get back to pcbway in a minute and show you how to order these actually from pcbway. And the cool thing is they have components on them and I didn't solder them. These are pre-made by pcbway, which is pretty cool. Especially the price for this is pretty cool. So what can you do with a SIDKickPico? You can have a SID replacement in your machine for less than, let's say, $8 or €8, depending on where you are in the world. You have a stereo SID, which is even cooler, for about €10 or dollars, all in. You can have a program launcher because this SID comes with games, or can come with games. You can program it so that it has programs up to 16 on the Pico and on this SID chip. So you don't have any cartridges, any drives attached. You just have your SID chip in your machine and you can sys into a menu to start these programs. And that is, in my opinion, one of the coolest features ever. So let's check this out. Let's build one and then let's put it in the machine and see what it does. By the way, it does emulate all SID chips, longboard and shortboard versions. So that is pretty cool too. So to build this SIDKickPico, and I will link in the description below where you can get this, you actually have to put a Raspberry Pi Pico on this. And the idea is that this just sits in the slot of the SID chip, which it actually does, and it works pretty well. So what you have to do is you have to solder your Raspberry Pi on here using these pin headers. These go in here and then you put your Pi on here like this. And on the underside of this, where the components are, you put these round pin headers. And it's very important to use these round pin headers because these pins are just too big. They barely fit into the socket, and if they fit, they will destroy the socket. So if you do this, go and get these round pin headers. And these go in here. And this goes in here. And as you can see, this has pretty much the footprint of a SID. And never mind, these pins are empty because they are just not used. So just plug it in the board like this and have your Raspberry Pi on top. And then you can go, if you want stereo. So if you want just the mono version, that is all you have to do. Solder the Pi on the Pico Pi on here like this, solder this header down here, and that is all you have to do to just get a SID replacement. And it works and it's great. And I paid sub $3 for this. And if I'm not completely mistaken, every board cost me $4. I will put the right price, the correct price in here, assembled with all the components, not just the empty board. And if you just want that, then you're good to go. You have a SID replacement, which is pretty inexpensive, for about €7 to €8 or dollars. If you want to go the stereo route, you also have to put on this little 2 pins here, and these go here. And then you can connect 2 cables, and these connect to the CPU on the board, and that gives you stereo SID capabilities. And if you want to go one further, we won't do this in this video, but you could. You just put this 5 pins here, and you add one of these super cheap DAX digital audio converters, a little purple board which you can buy on AliExpress. You will see the links in the description below. You plug it on here, solder it, and it has a 5.0mm audio jack, and you can just use the cable and plug it into your stereo, and you have stereo SID output on this in high quality, which is completely amazing. Yeah, that is pretty much all there is to assemble. So let me go and show you how to do this. And you start by putting in the round pins in this middle piece here, because it's very hard to solder under some other component, especially if this is sitting like this. So you have to do this first, and then we take it from there. And of course we have to program this, but this is super easy. You just need a standard USB-C cable in my case here. There's also Raspberry Pi Picos with the standard mini USB, and you just plug the cable in your computer and hold down the boot select button, this little white button here, and then it goes into boot mode, and then you can just copy over a file, and I will show you how to where to find this file, how to copy it over, and how to modify it to actually put your programs on this, which is, as I said, in my opinion, the coolest feature of this thing right here, because you have a completely naked C64 with just a video cable and a power cable and maybe a joystick, and that's all. And you have a C64 with 16 programs and stereo SID. That's just amazing. Okay, before we do anything else, let me show you how to order the board you need for the SIDKickPico. This is an open project on the pcbway open projects website. I will link this in the description, which is below or on the one of the sides here. As you can see, you can choose between only PCB or PCB and assembly, and I would strongly recommend, especially because the price is right, to go the PCB and assembly way. And you just go on PCB and assembly and add to cart. Then the window pops up. All the settings are already done. You don't have to do anything except for quantity. And I would say do 10, because 10 cost the same as 5. So why not do 10? At least from the PCB production standpoint. And you can choose the build time, which is more expensive the sooner you need it. So 3 to 4 days for $5 is pretty cool. And this is, by the way, you have two quantities. The first quantity up here is for the PCB itself. And here you can select 10, and that, and then you can select how many you want assembled. I would also ask you to take 10 because, well, why not? Then you get to the price I had, which is $4.60 or something. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you go to submit. Success. And then you can see this in your shopping cart. And as is always the case by pcbway, if you want to order something, it has to be audited by a support person. And you can see it says here subject to audit. So you cannot proceed to checkout immediately. You have to wait, and you get a mail if your stuff has been audited, and then you can go and proceed to checkout. And in the process of producing these PCBs, which takes about a day or two, and then assembling and ordering parts, you will get a photo of one assembled PCB, and you can say if it's okay or not. And in my case, it was okay. I assume that it's always okay because it's pretty straightforward. It's just a few components, and these guys do this every day. Yeah, and that is pretty much it. And then you proceed to checkout, and a few days later you get your 10 boards, and then you have to assemble it. And that's what we're going to do now. Little side note, Frenetic, I think it's called, he's called Frenetic, has more than just one project, and you may have already heard his name, or at least of his projects. The first one is the SIDKick64, which is a very popular cartridge for the C64, which is also Raspberry Pi 0 based, not Pico, but 0 based, and the RAM expansion unit, which I've already featured on the channel, and which is a great replacement for the standard RAM extension for the C64, which are pretty pricey. And it has all the DMA features, all the stuff, and you can use it to play Sonic and all the games which require a RAM expansion unit for the C64. And you can, of course, get the plain PCBs here. Yeah, so these are Frenetic's projects. You can follow him here. I already did. So let's get assembling. let's start by soldering in this middle pin row here. And this goes on the underside of this, because up here is the Raspberry Pi Pico. And what we do is we have two rows where these round pin headers go, and these are not the squared pads here, but the round pads, and we put it straight in the middle, right next to these ICs here. Make sure that you have this side on the PCB, the one with the little distance here, not sure how to call this, and put it in and turn it around. And just for good measure, take the second one and just put it somewhere on the side, doesn't matter where, and then use a socket just for soldering. And we push this in so that we know that this actually goes into any kind of socket, and this sits flush now. And you can see we have these pins here, but we're only going to solder the middle row here, not the outer row, just the middle row. Put the soldering iron to 400 degrees Celsius, or whatever your measurement for temperature is, because these pads need a bit of heat. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this row. Now we can pull the socket, and with it the second pin header here. We have just the one in the middle now, and it's flush to the board, which is very important. Since all the relevant components are already on the board here, we just go and we put in the headers for the Pi Pico, and we just put them where these square pads are, like this, and then make sure that these three spots on the Pico, these three golden pads, align with these three golden pads here, and put it on there like this. So that's a nice little Pico sandwich, and because we have soldered this already, there's no problem, because all the other solder pads, as you can see, are on the outside here, and we will go and solder these in a minute. And we will also program this after it's soldered together. That's also not a problem. So let's see that we can actually get this fixed here, at least on the four edges. So I will put some flux there so that I can do this one-handed. We are going to solder the top side with the Pico first, and then we're going to solder the other side. Like this, and we put it on the pad. Doesn't have to be perfect for now, just has to stick. So it just has to stick, like this. Now we can take the Pico off and have these things here. Okay. And now we can go and we can solder this Pico without the other board. And that is the first row done. And now we do the second one. And just like that, we have our pin headers on the Pico. Good. So now, not to forget to align these. Hot. To align, wow, it was hot, these pads again, and put it into the squared pads like this. So now let's go and solder the complete two rows. Be a bit patient here, because especially around these ICs, there's very little space to actually solder to. Come in from this side with the iron and put or take it like this and try to put the solder from this side and the iron from this side. It's much better and easier to solder to. Make sure that you don't close these holes here, because we need to solder to these. Okay, that's this row soldered. And yes, these pins are long, but we don't have to cut them, because if you look from the top, you can see that this black part of this middle pin, which is actually the part that goes into the socket, is a little bit higher than these pins. So we can leave these pins as long as we want, or at least that long, because it doesn't matter. And we do the second row. Okay, that is the second row sorted. So this is complete now. Pi is fixed on there. Now we have to put on the second pin row for the SID socket, which goes in here like this. And those two headers, one for the CPU pins, cables, and one for the DAC or DAC, digital audio converter. Like this. Then we can remove this socket here because this part goes into the SID socket. Okay. Now we go and we add the 5-pin header and the 2 pins on top of this. So next to the Pico we put these headers here, 2 pins here and 5 pins here. And we have to solder these in again, and this is getting pretty hot, so I will just use some tape for that to keep it in place. Okay, there's our 5-pin header for the DAC. And that is the finished product so far. Now we have to flash the Pico, which is pretty simple. And I will show you how to do this now. Okay, to get this flashed, we have to connect it to a PC, ideally a Windows PC, but could also be a Mac or Linux machine. I have my cable down here. Let me adjust the camera a little. That's my cable here, USB-C cable. And if I connect this now, you should hear the standard new device Windows sound. And there it is. We just leave it like this for now, and we head over to the PC. Okay, next up we go to the website of the SIDKickPico and we download the firmware, which we have to flash, which is just copying by dragging and dropping a file over on the Pi, the SIDKickPico. And we go to the GitHub page of Frenetic, and I will leave the link in the description below. You can see it here. Ignore this clarity thing up here. You scroll down and then you see releases here. There's much more info on this page, and we will get to this probably in episode 2, where I show you how to stereo this thing. But for now, just go to releases on the right side here. You can see as a SIDKickPico v0.20. Oh, it's just 2 days old. So this is actually the super fresh version. Let's go back to this page, the SIDKickPico page, which is linked in the description. And you can see it says here SIDKickPico version 0.20 latest +6 releases. You click on the +6 releases, and then you can see the v0.20 is here, and you click on it, and then you can see here's the zip file, and it works just the same, has all the same files. Download this, do the same stuff as I said before, and you're good to go, and it should actually work. And we go and we download the SKPico FWO201.zip. Just click on this and you can see it downloads up here. And then we open this up and this should pop up in my downloads folder, and you can see I had the FWO20 zip already prepared. So let's just unzip this. And now we have a folder, and we go into this folder, and you can see the hardware revisions here. And I use the revision 0.1. And here are different versions of this firmware, and that might be a bit overwhelming. Just keep in mind, if you don't have the DAC yet, which is the purple stereo board, which you need and which we will take a look at in episode 2 of this series, you just check these PWM versions, and we have an LED and an RGB. This just depends on the type of Pico you have. You can't go wrong with the first one, with the PWM UF2. The other two just have some LEDs that flash. So if you don't need it, and if your C64 is closed, you can't see the LED anyway. So just take this firmware here, the SKPico 2 PWM UF2, and then we go and open up a second Explorer window, and in here we go to the RPI RP2 or the Pico, however your Pico is called. Just check that you get to the Pico, and all you have to do is take this and drag it over here, just this one file, and it copies, and then it ejects the Pico, and voila, you have a ready-made SID replacement, which is pretty cool. We will get into how to get programs onto the SIDKickPico in a minute, but for now let's take this and let's try it in a machine. Okay, I hooked up the Boss 64, so let's quickly see if it actually works. And it does. Nice. So let's go in and let's switch out the SID chip, which is, or should be, this one right here. Yep. And this is an 6581R4AR. And what we do is we have to check that we can see on the underside of the SID chip here, there's a little notch here. And just keep in mind that the row with the fewer pins goes to the left side. I'll just go and we push it in. Okay, let's close it up. That should be all. So let me hook up my Pi 1541 and let's see if we get sound out of this. Let's select the classic Boulder Dash. There we are. Okay, it's loaded, and now it should give us sound. And there it is. Awesome. So this is a simple SID replacement, no stereo, just the plain good old SID. Let me show you something else. Disconnect everything, or the disk drive, start it again. And then if we type sys54301, ooh, that's interesting. That looks funky. Well, this is meant to be the menu. Let's try this again. Nope. No luck here. So on 3 other machines where I put this SIDKickPico in, that worked just fine. This one right here has a very rare 250466 board from 1986. And it seems that this version of the board has its issues with some software and seemingly with this one too. So we will try this in a different machine now, just to make sure that it actually works. But you can see that, well, the SID works perfectly fine. So I will close this machine up and we will take a different one. Brought out that very yellow 128 here, and that is in need of a SID chip. So let's just put one in. Already have removed all the necessary screws, and I even removed the SID chip. So that's good. So let's put in a SID chip there, and let's see if it also works in 128. I haven't tested this yet, but it should. Let's see what it does. Okay, 128 mode works. Let's go 64. And now let's type sys54301. And there's the config menu. and you can set the type of SID that you want. I'm going with the 6581. Volume, you can set the second SID or not. The address, volume, balance, you can say if this is a PAL or an NTSC machine, and the emulation type, and I will leave this at resit. And if you press F7, you get into a list, and that is empty right now. And the next thing we will do is we will fill this list. So let's go back, and if you press P, we'll just play some music. If we go to the help file, you can see that this is actually The Spark in Me by Flex. So this works flawlessly in a 128, and it should work not just in C64 mode, but in 128 mode too. As I said, this is now one SID replacement, just plug it in, good to go. Before we go and turn this into a stereo version, let's put some programs on this SID, because I think this is the coolest feature ever. And since I'm still waiting on the DACs from China, we can't do the DACs right now. So for now, let's head over to the PC again and let's put some games on the SID chip. Okay, let's take a look how we reflash or reprogram this Pico to have programs on it. Again, you take it and you push the boot select button, and then you plug it into your USB-C or USB mini cable. Should get the new device sound, which is great. And there we are, just like we left before. And let's see how to get programs onto this. You see there's a program called, or a folder called SIDKickPico patch. And we need this, and in here is a PRG folder and a patch.bat and a prg.list and a C++ source file and an exe file. And what this does is it takes a firmware which we have to copy over here. So we take the firmware from our firmware hardware revision 0.2, and we take you can take the PWM or any of these firmwares, and we just say copy. And then we paste this in here, like this. That's our firmware. And what we have to do now is we have to put programs into this program folder. And I have programs in my older version here. Let me show you. So here are programs 1942, Arkanoid, Beyond the Ice Palace, Bruce Lee, Bubble Bobble, all that stuff. And I just go and copy these. Should be 16. 16 is the maximum you have slots available on this. And I copy this over to this SIDKickPico PRG. And now I have all these program files in the PRG folder. And if I open this prg.lst, you can see there are 4 entries, and it says PRG file 1.prg menu entry 1. And let me show you how this should look for these programs, and then you will probably pretty easily grasp what you have to do if you want to change these. I again go here because I have my program list already done here. If I open this program list, we try to separate this. Is this possible? No, it's not. Ah, it is. Okay. So you can see it still is PRG, which is a folder, and then the file name of the program you want to start, and then the title that should appear in the menu behind the colon. And this is my PRG list, so I just go and copy this here over to this here, and I save. So now I have my, where am I? Let me check. I have to be here. So now I have my PRGs here. I have my PRG list here. And I have my firmware here. And now I have all the parts to patch this firmware here to include all these programs. And what I have to do is I have to call this batch file from the DOS shell, or I go and just copy it, paste, and I call this, let's say, patch2.batch, and we can open this in Notepad, and you can see it actually calls the exe file with a %1, which is a parameter, and the parameter is the name of this firmware. So we go and copy this name here, and we copy this, and we go and instead of this %1, we just go and copy in this file name. So now whenever we call this batch2batch, it patches just this firmware here. So whatever parameter we give doesn't matter. We have two parameters here which we just leave as is, because these are timing, bus timing parameters, and don't mess with these. They lead to all kinds of problems, and just leave them as they are. Save. And now we can just go and double click on patch2.bat. And what happens is that we get another UF2 file, which is SKPicoPRG.uf2, which is the patched file, has the same file as the first firmware, but all the program files which are in this folder here, or which are in this list and in this folder, are in here. If you get errors, it's most likely that you have some spelling errors in the PRG list of the files here. So we can now use this UF2 file, and we open a second Explorer again, like this, go to the RPI file and just reflash by pulling this newly created firmware over here. Eject, and we have now SIDKickPico with 16 programs on it. And you can of course use any program you like. It doesn't use D64 files or CRT files, just PRG files work. So make sure you have PRG files, which limits it a bit, but there are a lot of programs out there. I have, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 programs, games which are just programs and not D64 files. If you need some, just go to the Internet Archive and search for C64 PRG files, and you will get lots and lots of them. Okay, so let's put this in a machine and let's see what goes. And just like before, I have the 128 out, and the SID is still missing. So let's take this one here and let's plug this in here. Plug it in, close it up. Let's see what it does. Here goes nothing. There we are. We say go, and we use sys 54301. And there's our configuration menu. By the way, the configuration is of course always deleted when you refresh the Pico, so you have to go in and do that again. Otherwise it is saved on the Pico itself. And you press S to save the configuration, and then we press F7. We see nothing, which is not good. It seems for my version I actually need the version 0.1. So, flashed again. Let's see what it does now. 54301. Bam. Bam. Looks good. We have to change the SID again. Press S. Press F7. And again, no files. What the freaking... Or is it just a 128? Could be. Could it be that this doesn't work in a 128? Or is it actually the firmware? So to confirm that, this is still the new firmware. the 2 days old firmware. Let's grab a C64 and plug that in there and see if that's any different. Okay, here's one of my C64s, and that has already one of these SIDKickPicos inside, and it does work with the games. Let's take this out and let's put in the USB-C version here, which I have prepared with the new firmware. So let's see what it does. So there we are. Let's change. Oh, it's already the correct thing, and let's press F7. And we have no games. I think this is actually a firmware problem, because let me show you how it should look. So I would strongly recommend to use the older firmware. So let's put in the Pi that was in here before, this one. And let's fire it up again. And we have the wrong SID, which is not a problem. Save this and we press F7, and here you can see a list of games. And that is what I wanted to see before. You can just select any game. Let's take Master of Magic, and it starts. It loads instantly, which is pretty cool. And there's Master of Magic. Yeah, so this is a SIDKickPico with programs, which is, in my opinion, the coolest thing I have seen in a long time, especially for something that's sub $10 in production or manufacturing or building. Yeah, use the 0.20 version for now. I think there will be an update pretty soon. And have fun. I mean, 16 games, just a plain 64 with a SID chip inside, and you can just sys into a menu of games. That's just incredible. And it works flawlessly with the correct firmware. So, in part 2, I will show you how to connect all this to the CPU, and I will show you how to do the stereo version with a DAC, the digital audio converter, which is still in the mail somewhere from China. Hopefully gets here this week so that I can do a part 2 next week. So, as always, thanks for watching, and I just saw that we crossed the 8,000 subs. So thank you for your trust, for always watching these videos, for liking, subscribing, yeah, being here and watching me do stuff. If you have any ideas what I could do, or if you know about any cool stuff that I should show on the channel, please let me know. By the way, I have one sneak preview. I got this little box here, and yes, I paid for this myself. And inside this box is this little wrapped package here. And inside this wrapping is this. And if you know your C64, you know what this is. This is a Turbo Chameleon by Individual Computers. And it's not just this. This comes with a little extension, which is in box number 2, which, by the way, I also paid myself for. And this is this here, a piece of wood with something attached to it. And the Turbo Chameleon is a pretty cool device, which I will show in one of the next videos. You can already spot a VGA and PS2 and stuff like that. And this goes together to create this. And what this is, I will show in one of the next videos. So, subscribe, stay cool, see you around. Cheerio. Thanks again to pcbway for sponsoring this video. If you need any PCBs, pre-assembled PCBs or 3D printing, please use the link in the description below.
Thank you for watching Retro is the New Black. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. If you like the video, please share. Every like, share, and comment helps a lot. Until next time, bye-bye.